that it is as easy for people to exercise their right to vote as it can be. And I don't think that there would be anybody that would disagree with that statement. The other important one is that it is important that the voters have the opportunity to know who is participating in the election and that those participants are qualified to vote. And I don't think there's any disagreement on that component either. The problem is that there's a natural tension between those two statements, because the easier you make it to vote, the harder it is to make sure that things are secure. And the more you make things secure, the more difficult it might be to exercise that right to vote. And if you take it to extremes, you can make it so easy that you just create an open environment for fraudulent voting to take place. And then on the other side of that is, if you make it too difficult, then you create a situation where there's voter suppression, where qualified people are not able to exercise their right to vote. So we have to rely on our legislature to debate those policies and find where that appropriate balance is between making it easy to vote and making sure that the vote is secure. And with a 400-member House of Representatives in New Hampshire and a 24-member Senate, there are a lot of ideas on how to get to that balance line. And so there has been some bills that have gone through to tighten up the security end of the voting process. And there is a law currently in place called that created affidavit ballots. And affidavit ballots are filled out by voters who show up at the polls and they are registering for the first time in the state of New Hampshire who don't have an acceptable form of identification. And when that happens, the moderator will have that person fill out an affidavit and allow them to proceed to vote. But on the back of the ballot will be written affidavit ballot number and whatever that number is in sequential order. And then that voter has 7 days to retrieve the documentation that's needed to prove identity, get it to the Secretary of State's office so that that ballot will remain counted. If the voter does not do that, then the Secretary of State has to instruct the moderator in that town to retrieve that ballot and then subtract the votes on that ballot from the overall total. And that's the present law. The governor just signed a bill that passed this past session called House Bill 1569. And what that bill does is it removes the opportunity to fill out an affidavit to prove qualifications. So that means when a new voter goes to the polls, they have to be able to prove with documentation their identity, age, citizenship, and domicile. The governor signed that bill, which was to take effect 60 days after passage, after when the governor signed it, which made the effective date on that bill about 4 days after the election on November 5th is over. So the question is, those voters, that 1569 also repealed the provisions of Senate Bill 418, the affidavit ballot bill. And so the question is, if a voter votes with an affidavit ballot, and then that law kicks into effect that repeals that statute, does the voter still have to come back and provide that documentation because of the new law that has went into effect in that interim period? And so I did come out today with a statement after confirming with the Attorney General that we will enforce the provisions of Senate Bill 418, the affidavit law, through its entirety. We're not going to we're not going to institute another procedure because another law passed in the interim. So if somebody on election day voted using an affidavit ballot, the expectation is that they will have to return with their documentation within 7 days, regardless of the implementation date of 1569. And the reason for that is twofold. One is, when there have been similar situations in the past, the courts have always taken the position, we are not going to cause a confusing situation by changing the law in close proximity to the election. And then number two is, if you look at both Senate Bill 418 and House Bill 1569, there is nothing in there that infers that the legislature intended to not follow through on requiring that additional information. So that was my decision. I make a challenge in court, and we'll see what that happens. But from the perspective of the voters, I'd like you to just forget about it. Don't be confused by that quirk in the statute, and make sure you register if you haven't, that you vote. And it would be really helpful to everybody if you have documentation. Just take it with you, and that will help the process move very smoothly.
But same day voting is still.
We still have election day registration. Yep.
Thank you very much.
That was a long-winded answer.